What is up, my aesthetic boys? It's Fresh, back with another video. The last malicious compliance video I did seemed to get a pretty positive reaction, so I figured let's go back and let's make it longer. Not allowed a kettle in the office? Okay, I'll carry the coffee instead. Back in the days before fruit phones and robot phones, I worked in IT at a local council. There were 12 members of our team, 7 of whom drank hot drinks during the day, tea or coffee. We had a kettle and a small fridge that we had each paid for in the corner of the office and took it in turns to make tea and coffee for all in the team. The system worked perfectly until health and safety came and said we can't have electrical appliances in the office as they need to be tested. We got them tested and they passed. Health and safety came back and said that the kettle was too dangerous. It was tall and thin and could tip over. We replaced it with a wide-bottomed kettle that wasn't as easy to tip over. Health and safety came back and said that having a hot water source that close to staff could burn them. Kettle had to be removed within a week. Our reply was that there were no burns since we had the kettle and the nearest kitchen with hot water was 2 floors up and the other side of the building, and that it used a water boiler. It would take extra time to make drinks and then have to carry them down the stairs where accidents could easily happen. Health and safety said it was their way or not at all. We relented and the kettle disappeared. My boss said that it was only a matter of time until someone trips or slips on the stairs carrying a tray of hot drinks. Day 3 after the kettle went, AK. New girl slipped on the stairs and caused damage to a light when her tea soaked it. H&S needed to fill out a 7-page report and the light had to be replaced at a cost of £150. Day 9 after kettle. One of the team, called Victor, not real name, slipped on wet stairs and his hot tea caused burns to the person coming up. Other person off work for 2 weeks and H&S needed to fill in a different 12-page report. Day 22 after kettle. I slipped on wet stairs with a tray of drinks. 2nd-degree burns to my chest and arms. Off for 2 weeks on full pay. Another 12-page report. Day 23 after kettle. Kettle is returned. Damn, OP. 2nd-degree burns across your chest and arms just to get the kettle back? I mean, absolute respect, dude. Way to take one for the team. When retail customers feel entitled to extra discounts for no reason, so you give it to them. I worked at a pretty popular department store for years, and I have to say that the customers this store breeds are the worst of the worst. This store is probably 90% of the reason that so many customers feel as entitled as they do. The cashier had the hiccups, it was incredibly annoying, isn't there anything you can do for me, was an actual honest-to-God complaint one lady had for me when I was a supervisor. So anyway, I was covering a break up at the registers. I was a supervisor at the time, and I had also already given my 2 weeks notice. I was beyond fed up. It was like spring of my senior year all over again. So I'm up at the registers, and this lady who couldn't have been more than 40 comes up with a huge cartful. Anyone who has worked retail, you know this woman. She's got the hair, she's smacking her gum at me while she talks on the phone, the entire transaction is delayed because I need her to pay, and she starts to ignore me because apparently I'm the rude one for interrupting her phone call. She proceeds to tell the person on the other end, give me a second, and finally turns to me and says, as if I'm an impatient child testing her last bit of patience, yes? Here's your total, ma'am. Do you have any coupons or rewards to use today? She nodded, and here's when she drops a few clippings on the counter in front of me, ignoring my outstretched hand, and turns her attention back to her phone. As soon as I look at the coupons, I see that none of them are usable. She has one that is $10 off your menswear purchase of $50 or more. She has all women's clothing. The next coupon expired 2 months ago. Another one doesn't start for another week, etc., etc. So I try again to get her attention. She's just as lovely and accommodating as the last time. She rolls her eyes, tells the person on the phone that she will have to call them back, and gives me another sharp, yes? Sorry ma'am, this coupon is expired. This one hasn't started, and this one is only for when you purchase $50 worth of menswear. Do you have any other coupons or rewards? She stares at me like I had just called her mother some unsavory name. Excuse me, what? What could I do but shrug helplessly? You have got to be kidding me. This is the entire reason I came here today, to use these coupons. I really can't use them? Unbelievable. Some customer service here. All the while she's packing her useless coupons back into her purse and glaring scorch marks into my soul. Remember how I said I was done? My patience before Shopzilla here was already at 0. She tipped the scales. I was officially in the negatives. I had negative patience left. So when she said, "You should be ashamed of yourself being so rude to a customer," something in me snapped. I smiled sweetly at her, mustered up a bright and cheery expression that I usually reserve as my waitress face, and said, "I'm so sorry you feel that way, ma'am, but on the bright side, since it's Tuesday, I can still apply your senior's discount, so at least you aren't losing that one, right?" I can't quite describe her expression. I think she was angry, but I think she was more shocked. And in that state of shock, she sputtered out, "I'm not a senior." I mimicked her shock, trying to be horrified by my accidental faux pas, and then immediately said, "Let me take that off there for you then," and promptly took the senior discount off, bumping her total up another $20. "I'm so sorry for the misunderstanding, ma'am." Oh boy, she was pissed, but like I said, I think she was more shocked. She seemed a little dumbfounded. She paid, she took her stuff, she left. I will take that moment of satisfaction at her horrified expression to my grave. It was even worth the write-up that I did end up getting after she called the store and gave my manager a piece of her mind. Ooh, who ordered the side of petty revenge on this dish? Man, this is the kind of quick thinking that I appreciate. That woman's gonna be self-conscious for God knows how long that this random cashier said that the senior discount could be applied to her order. And on top of that, she still had to pay the extra $20. Definitely a lose-lose. Want to act like a child? You'll get treated as one. About 3 years ago, my boyfriend at the time and I were going to a concert. I was on my way to his house to leave, but was starving, so I decided to grab a salad from a popular salad joint. Mind you, I was already running a bit late, but I was so hungry and thought this was something quick. Being the good girlfriend I I called up my boyfriend and asked what he wanted from here. He said he was really hungry as well, but didn't want anything from the salad place. He wanted a cheeseburger. I told him I didn't want to stop anywhere else, especially somewhere completely out of the way because we were already behind schedule. He threw a fit and started saying how I'm so rude to him and all this other nonsense. After going back and forth for several minutes, I gave up. After I get my food, I drive over to the place he asked me to and ordered him a kid's meal and extra sides, since he wanted to act like a child. When I handed him his kid's meal, I could tell he really wanted to laugh, but couldn't because he was still mad. I like the little bits of petty revenge that are finding their way into these malicious compliance stories, and it's also nice to see a real wholesome story here that, you know, people bicker about stupid things all the time, but at least it seemed like a healthy relationship where they were both able to laugh at their faults and recognize that what they did was wrong. How to swear around the bookstore. Children in the bookstore can be problematic. For every 9-year-old eager to show you how careful they're being and articulate enough to tell off adults for mishandling a book, there's an absolute brat who will rip out pages if left unattended for 3 seconds. Unfortunately, the latter have the kind of parents that will rip you a new one for daring to speak to their darling child. Parents, it turns out, are the true problem. One evening, a curmudgeonly lady troll ventured into the shop with 3 hellbrats in tow. She showed her kids one table of books, told them it was the kids section, and went on a pointless mission to find our romance section. We don't have one. I walked over and tried to explain to the kids that that was not actually the children's section, and show them where it was. "No, you don't speak to my kids. You have no right to speak to my kids. I've shown them where the books are. I know what's appropriate for them. They have every right to be in here. You leave them alone." Speaking to me in my own store like that would usually just get you kicked out, but I looked at what they'd chosen to read from that table, shrugged, and walked back to the desk. About 10 minutes later, a lone thought makes its way hesitantly through her skull, and she realizes the hellbrats are giggling way too frequently and quietly. She finally decides to check out what they have chosen to read, only to discover she had actually put the kids at our gift section, and they had been reading How to Swear Around the World. She came screaming and storming up to the counter to enact her terrible retribution, but I just smiled sweetly and reminded her that she knows what is appropriate for her own children, and I have no right to speak to them. They seemed upset that they weren't allowed to keep the book, but I think they vastly improved their vocabulary that day. Well, first on the topic of writing, the description of a curmudgeonly lady troll and 3 hellbrats is one of the best that I've seen in any Reddit post. Along with that though, is it actually common that children will rip out pages from bookstore books? I've certainly never seen it happen, and I certainly don't recall doing anything close to that as a child or ever feeling that could be an appropriate thing to do, but is that really a problem? Again, like OP said, I don't think that children are born necessarily more inclined than not to tear pages out of books, and it does seem to be a parental issue. Another airline seat story. This happened 10 years ago. My wife and I had a destination wedding. We had a large group fly with us, so the airline gave us a free upgrade to first class. We were given seats A and B of row 4, window and aisle for those not familiar with airline seating. C and D were middle of the plane with no windows, and E and F were aisle and window on the other side of the plane. When we boarded, there was a couple in our seats. We asked them to move so we could have our seats. Surprisingly, they outright refused. I didn't want to fight with them, nor was it my job. I grabbed a flight attendant and explained the situation. She came over and confirmed that they were actually in row 1, seats C and D. She asked them to move and they refused. She told them that they didn't have a choice. They became very rude about it and still refused. Before it escalated any further, I offered to swap seats with them now that we know where they were sitting. I had no problem with their seats either, these are free upgrades after all. The flight attendant and the couple agreed that we were officially swapping seats. Everyone was happy and the flight attendant made sure that we got a glass of champagne first. About 5 minutes after all this went down, another couple gets on the plane, and I guess, unsurprisingly, it turns out the airline double booked the seats that we were originally assigned. The couple we swapped with were also part of a group package free upgrade, so the couple coming on took priority since they actually paid for their first class seats. After some more arguing, the couple we swapped with agreed to give up those seats. I was kind of shocked since first class was full at this point. Then, what shouldn't have been a surprise, the couple began moving their bags above our new seats in row 1. The flight attendant stopped them and pointed out they had officially swapped seats with us. She told them there were seats available in coach. They began yelling and screaming and being all around nasty people. Eventually, the flight attendant got the captain, who came out and told them their choice was to go to coach or get another flight. They reluctantly went to coach. The woman was bawling loudly the whole way. It seemed like everything was good for a couple hours. Then, about 2 or 3 hours into the flight, an old guy comes into first class. I was asleep at this point and was woken up by him grabbing me and trying to haul me out of my seat. I'm a big guy, and this was a guy much smaller and a lot more drunk than me, so it didn't take much to reject his attempts. Turns out he was the father of the woman who we swapped seats with. I got up just to make sure I was able to protect myself, and this stupid old man threw a punch. It was weak and barely grazed my arm, but that's not something you should do on a flight especially. A guy who I assume was the air marshal grabbed him and dragged him out of first class. Things calmed down again for about 30 minutes before the woman came rushing into first class. She starts yelling and trying to fight the flight attendant. The same guy walked in and dragged her to coach, then returned. A few hours later, without any more incidents, the plane landed in our destination. We were asked to remain seated when the plane was parked. A small team of cops boarded the plane and removed the daughter and father in handcuffs. Don't believe inhalers are needed? Have fun losing your job. So this is actually a story that my mom told me from when she was in 8th grade. She had this art teacher, we'll call her Mrs. X, who absolutely hated her. She was an older lady with only 1 year left before retirement. This will be important later. My mom had PE right before her art class, and she also has really bad asthma. She had left her inhaler in her locker, and when she was let out late of gym, she decided to go straight to art, drop off her backpack, and then ask to go grab her inhaler from her locker. Mrs. X, having hated my mom for some time, told her to wait until announcements were over and then she could leave. She decided not to fight and to go wait for announcements. My mom's friends were ticked and they knew she had terrible asthma, so they were trying to convince her to just leave the classroom because Mrs. X didn't deserve her attention, being the witch she was. My mom said no and waited patiently until she was allowed to leave. Once the announcements were over, she went to Mrs. X asking if she could finally leave. Her response was, "Well, if you had enough oxygen to sit there and talk to your friends rather than listening, then I don't think you need your inhaler." At this point, my mom is wheezing and had started to get a headache from not being able to breathe. But again, she listens to her teacher, not wanting to get further on her bad side, and waits for class to end before she can grab her inhaler. Her friends continue telling her to just leave since she isn't doing any work anyway, but she tells them to just wait, knowing full well how her body reacts to asthma attacks. At the end of class, her friends booked it with my mom's locker combination to grab her inhaler because my mom was in no shape to run. However, when they finally brought it to her, she couldn't take in enough air for the inhaler to be of any help. Her friends rushed her to the nurse's office where they told her about Mrs. X and how my mom couldn't breathe. The nurse ended up having to call an ambulance. My mom was rushed to the hospital, admitted into the ICU, almost had to get intubated, and was there for 10 days. Her parents were furious, and my grandfather was ready to sue the entire state. The school, knowing that Mrs. X was only a year away from retirement and not wanting to take away the benefits she'd earned from staying, ended up striking a deal with my grandparents. My mom no longer had to take art, even though it was a required class for 8th grade, so she aided for the counselors that period. The school district was also in charge of paying for my mom's medical bills. My grandparents wanted her to lose her job, but agreed to the terms. But the story doesn't end there. My mom's brother, who was in 7th grade at the time of the incident, had to take sculpting the next year with Mrs. X, her last year. A few weeks into the class, my grandparents got a letter informing them that my uncle was failing art. When confronted, he told them that on the first day of school, he had asked Mrs. X a question and she had accused him of being disrespectful. As punishment, she made him sit in a room that branched off from the main classroom. Every day afterwards, she would falsely accuse him of something and force him to sit in that room where he couldn't get any work done, hence why he was failing. My grandmother called up the school district in a rage, telling them that the original agreement was now off because Mrs. X was unfairly taking out her rage on my uncle and that they were ready to sue. Because the school district never thought to get my grandparents to sign a contract saying they wouldn't sue, they were forced to fire Mrs. X, much to the delight of my mother. She never got the benefits from retirement. Edit, just to clear up some confusion since I asked my mom some clarifying questions. She didn't listen to her friends and leave the classroom because she knew she was going to have an asthma attack and wanted to get Mrs. X in trouble after class. She was expecting a quick trip to the nurse's office where she could tell on the teacher, but it ended up more severe than she intended. It's one of the reasons why she'll never leave the house without an inhaler on her. She also followed up the story telling me to never do what she did because she won't be as forgiving as my grandparents were. Damn, risking your life just for this? I know that she didn't intend to risk her life, but that is some hardcore malicious compliance. Like, yeah, you won't let me get my inhaler? I'll just sit here and die. Whatever. Alright, I got one more story for you guys. Number 15. Burger King foot lettuce. The last thing you'd want in your Burger King burger is someone's foot fungus. But as it turns out, that might be what wrong video, my bad. Thank you to everyone who watched this video. Be sure to subscribe for more daily Reddit content. Drop a like if you liked the video, and I will see you all tomorrow.